anything else.
We don't want to know.
We're dedicated, yes,
to our favorite shows.
Oh my circuits!
Everybody loves Hypnotoad.
Scary dog!
Dancing at Blurred Ball.
Futurama.
Good evening. You are listening to a Radulich Broadcasting premiere podcast TV party tonight. I'm your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. And tonight, our favorite show is a direct-to-video DC Comics animated original movie based on the graphic novel Red Sun, brought to you by the good people at Warner Brothers Animation and DC Entertainment. Joining me tonight from Honeysuckle Rose Creations is a big fan of ye old Red Sun trade, Alexis Hejna. How do you do, madam?
Dobry večer.
Gesundheit.
Good evening in Russian.
Yeah, I got that. Gracias. Ciao. Aloha? All right. So this is actually going to be an interesting show because Alexis and I are actually embarking on a new show. We had this show planned before the coronavirus wiped out most of my schedule. So I don't want people to be like, oh, well, sure, there's no movies to review, so, they come up with something new. Nope, we had this plan from a while back. It just, actually the coronavirus gave us the opportunity in the open spots to backfill with some of these.
There's still a handful of spots that we're trying to fill thanks to the virus, but this is not one of them.
So we're going to be debuting very soon a new show called Comic Stripped. And Comic Stripped is not a novel concept. What we're going to be doing is what I used to call the split 7-inch. You may recall we did a split 7-inch for The Kitchen, where we reviewed the trade and the movie in the same podcast, rather than do separate source materials and TV parties. So,
I think most people just remember how desperately you were trying to find someone to review that movie, because Robert and I both put our hands up and said, nope, not touching it.
Yep, Jesse dove on that grenade, and Pat actually jumped at the opportunity just to yell about how ridiculous it was. So, it worked out. So that's what we'll be doing. When you see the header Comic Stripped, know that it's Alexis and I reading a trade, reviewing its direct adaptation, just to give you some ideas of what we'll be doing. The first one we'll be doing is Batman versus TMNT, which was a trade and then a direct-to-video, direct adaptation of said trade. We're also going to do, because I've decided you said yes to this already, I'm not okay with this, coincidentally.
Yeah, you kind of approached me for that, and I just sort of sat there and said, so this is how Robert feels every day of the week.
Yep. You've been drafted. Welcome to the Army.
And you know what? I don't have any conventions for probably another 2 months. I need stuff to do.
Exactly. Be grateful that I am... Never mind. So
it's like I can't leave my house except to go to the grocery store or the post office. I don't have children to teach like you and your wife, so I don't have my essential job is in my own office. It's not like I'm leaving anywhere. And heck, even my parents are minimizing how much time I can see them. You know how insanely depressing it is that we live in a world where a mother is too afraid to hug their child?
Yeah, it sucks to be alive right now. So we'll be doing I'm Not Okay With This, the book and the show that's currently on Netflix, and we'll be doing Batman versus TMNT. But for now, this is kind of like even though it's a TV party, since we've already reviewed Red Sun a year or so back with Ronnie Adams on plug on the Source Material podcast, this is kind of a unofficial Comic Stripped here. And with that said, Alexis, I know that Red Sun was one of your favorites. You came along after, I think, we had done Red Sun, so you never had the opportunity to discuss it. Let's talk for a little bit about how you came to the book, what it means to you, why you were so excited for it, and how we got to wanting to review the animated movie.
Well, you are correct. Once I started working on source material, you and Jesse approached me and asked if there were any books that I really wanted to talk about. And the two that I named were Red Sun and Kingdom Come. You had already done Red Sun, but Kingdom Come was one of the first ones that I got to not helm, I would say, but be at the forefront of the review is probably a good way to put it. For the record, Kingdom Come is also an amazing book. If you haven't read it, what the hell is wrong with you? Go order it on Amazon, because you probably shouldn't go to the store to buy it right now. Anyway, Red Sun was one of the 3 first comic books I ever bought. I had heard about it years prior from a reviewer, Louis Lovehog, goes by the screen handle Linkara, when he was discussing the ups and downs of Elseworld stories. And he used Superman Red Sun as an example of an Elseworld story done right. And I was always fascinated by it. Growing up in the late 80s, I was born in '84. I was around during the end of the Cold War, and I saw a lot of things being impacted by it. And I didn't really understand it at first, but now that I'm older, I can look back and I think, wow, it's so interesting how that little thing was changed. And I noticed, but I didn't really grasp why it was so important. I've always been very... I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I was in junior high when the Berlin Wall came down. And it's hard kind of seeing the world through my kids' eyes, and, and when I try to impress upon them the impact of a cultural happening, and they just sort of stare at me blankly and blink twice. I now understand what was going on with my teachers when I was 11, 12, 13 years old, however old I was. I guess if it was 87, that would have made me 11. I distinctly remember being in junior high, and just them trying to impress upon, their dead-eyed junior high students in the Plain Edge School District how important it was to see the fall of the Berlin Wall. The baby boomers, having lived through the height of the Red Scare and mutually assured destruction. When I was in elementary school, I think this by the time you may have gotten to school, this may have been a thing of the past. But when I was in elementary school for the first couple of years, we were still doing air raid drills, which was essentially go into the hallway, stick your head between your knees, and pray, and pray you don't get nuked.
Yeah, well, what's that line from Chicken Run? In the case of emergency, place your head between your knees and kiss your butt goodbye.
Right.
So no, if we never did well, let me put it this way. I remember doing fire drills when I was little, and maybe they stuck in an air raid drill in there. I don't remember.
No, this was distinctly go into the hallway and stick your head between your knees, which I don't remember doing past like 4th or 5th grade.
I thought those were tornado drills.
I guess the assumption here was, in the case of the Russians nuking New York City and the fallout hitting Long Island, the building may shake and come apart, in which case you needed to sit with your protect your head and sit with your back up, because when the cement ceiling fell on you, your back would somehow save your frail body. I have no idea what they were thinking here. I guess it was better than nothing.
Duck and cover.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I distinctly remember the importance being impressed upon us of those who had lived through the post-World War II era, how important the end of the Soviet Union was.
Well, like I was saying, I've always been very fascinated by the Cold War, this stalemate that we went through. Actually, one of the more interesting talking points, those of you who've heard me talk on the show before, you know that my husband is Romanian. His parents fled Romania while it was still under the Iron Curtain. First time my parents met their parents, it was some pretty interesting conversations. So, no, this is something I've always been very interested in, even before I knew about the book. Every time I talk to someone about Elseworld stories, I always bring this one up. One of my favorite memories is I had to go to the hospital to pick up my aunt. She was having a routine procedure, and I was her ride. And I'm waiting in the front room, and I'm wearing my Superman Red Sun T-shirt, which has the Red Sun symbol on it, which is the sickle and the hammer in the Superman shield. Mm-hmm. And I've worn this shirt a million times. It's one of my favorites. It was one of the first shirts I ever picked up at a Comic-Con. And this older gentleman walks over to me, and he just gives me this look. He's like, "You support the Soviet Union?" I wasn't even thinking. I was like, "Oh, no, that's not what this is."
Did I ever tell you my Lamb of God story?
If you have, I don't remember.
So, are you aware that there's a fairly popular heavy metal band called Lamb of God?
Don't think I've ever heard them, but I know I've seen that name thrown around here and there. So,
okay. So, long story short, I'm wearing just a plain black T-shirt, and it says in their logo, but their logo is also very plain. It's just the lettering, Lamb of God, and there's nothing on the back. So, I used to do in-home therapy in Miami, and I go to the kid's house, and I'm grabbing my notes and my stuff to deal with this kid. And I get it all out of the car, and I start to walk across the street, and I'm accosted by this guy, and he's like, "Hey, I just noticed your shirt." And I'm like, "Okay." And he was just like, and he starts going into, like, the biblical explanation of Lamb of God, because he thinks that's what that is.
Oh, Lord.
And I had to stop him about halfway through and say, two things. One, I'm here on a business deal. I gotta go, deal with a kid. And two, that's not what this is. This is a heavy metal T-shirt. And he was like, and so then he took a second crack at it. Because now he's thinking I'm somebody he can convert. And I'm like, so let me say again, I don't have time for this. Have a nice day. God bless.
Oh, God.
So back to Red Sun. So this holds a special meaning for you. Talk to me about the book itself. Having read through it, I think you just gave it another reread again. Give me the kind of 50 words or less Alexis Hejna review of the trade.
If you want to read, and like I was saying before, if you want to read an Elseworld story, the idea of taking the characters that we know and putting them in a completely different situation, this is the best example I could ever give. Each character that is pulled from the regular DCU feels in place as their new alternative counterpart. Nothing feels forced. Nothing feels shoehorned in. Absolutely love it. I love this book so much that when my dad was recovering with, I think it was foot surgery. Both my parents have had way too many surgeries. This was one of the graphic novels that I gave him while he was stuck in bed and unable to get out for a while. He never actually revealed to me if he read it or not. He was interested in it, though. He did think the concept was cool. I just love talking to people and saying, what if, instead of landing in rural Kansas, when Superman came to Earth, it was 12 hours later, and he landed in Soviet Russia? And the look on people's face when you just throw that idea out, and they're interested. I love that. I don't even have to go into anything else. I don't have to talk about Luthor or Lois Lane or Wonder Woman or Green Lantern. Boom, they're sold.
It's a very fun idea. And I think the trade does a really excellent job of... The nice thing about What Ifs and Elseworlds is they're not beholden to have the series continue, so they can take risks with the characters. They can kill characters. They can do unpopular things. They can really stretch the boundaries of imagination and storytelling. And with this one, because they don't have to do an ongoing Superman series that has to anchor the whole publishing company, they're able to do a story in which, there's some very interesting things happen in the narrative, and I'm going to let you go ahead and talk about that. In as far as this goes very far into the future of a world dominated by a Soviet Superman, and what that means, and the kind of twists and turns that it takes, and how Lex Luthor relates to him, and what their relationship is like from across the Atlantic Ocean. It's all very, very, very cool stuff.
Well, I think one of the things that bugs me about certain Elseworld stories is that the writer gets the idea that because they're putting the character into a different scenario, they can change the character's, well, character. I mean, how many Elseworld stories have we read where it's been, oh my god, why the hell would they act like this? I mean, you want to talk about an Elseworld story that's a nightmare, I recommend checking out Act of God. That was so bad, and I hate how many times the characters just kind of sat around and had pity parties about how we were too arrogant, we're being rightfully punished. Like, that's not the way they're going to talk. That's not what they're going to say. You know, I hate to sound like a Snyder fanboy here, but it really does drive me nuts when a writer thinks that because they move the characters to a different scenario, they are essentially erasing what we know about them. Red Sun, I feel, did a really great job still holding on to what we know these characters are like. Superman, Clark Kent, whatever you want to call him, even growing up in a different scenario like communist Russia and dedicating his powers to the state, is still the character that we know. He still wants to do good. He is still somebody who his only true compassion is not for the state or the powers, it is for everyone else. This is a man, alien, hero, whatever, who would still sacrifice his life at a moment's notice to help others. That's always been Superman's character, and I love that this book held on to that.
So, let's talk now about the adaptation. You should know that in the book, as Alexis said, Superman lands in the Ukraine. There's a time jump to where he sort of arrives as the Soviet Superman under Stalin. And he is touting the beliefs of the Soviet system. Lex Luthor is a scientist in America post-World War II. He's married to Lois Lane, who's... what else would she be? There's an infinite amount of universes, and all of them, Lois Lane is a journalist. So, Lex Luthor, just as he is in our known DC continuity, is obsessed with dealing with Superman. And this has the rub of, well, it's the Red Menace. It's the rise of communism embodied by Superman. Now, in the book, over the course of 3 issues, bounded into one trade, basically, Lex tries a number of different things to take out Superman, some of which is captured in the movie. Can you remember what all... how we get to the place where Superman... Take me from the beginning of Lex and Superman dealing with one another to Brainiac shrinking Stalingrad.
Well, the movie did get correct Luthor's idea to have a satellite fall onto a major metropolitan center. And the phone call to the president is pretty much exactly like that. It's like, okay, yeah, I can do it. I need this, and I need your permission to knock a satellite out of orbit and send it careening into the Earth. That's pretty much word for word. And yes, he knows that Superman will save it, and then using the satellite, he is able to get a DNA sample off of it from where his hands kind of crushed in the metal, so to speak. I mean, you have a satellite going that fast, and you have someone as strong as Superman, sure, he's going to save it, but there's no way there's not going to be an indenture on that metal, and it's probably going to leave a few skin flakes behind. It is interesting to note that the clone, which it's called in the book, it's called Superman 2. In the movie, it's called Superior Man.
And it's an analog for Bizarro.
Exactly. And I'd also like to add that the line America First was not in the book.
Yeah,
we know why that was added.
There are 1 or 2 liberties.
Yeah, I hate to say it, when I watched that the other night, I just kind of froze for a second because, again, I had not this is one of my favorite books, but I had not read it in a little over a year. And I was just sitting there going, wait, was that in the book? And I just kind of grabbed, like, oh, thank God it's not. And it's also important to note that the fight scene is very different. In the book, Superman manages to trick, we're just going to call him Bizarro because that's who it is, into sacrificing his life to help save people. In the movie, Luthor has some method of turning up his energy. I have absolutely no idea how.
Yeah, he's like feeding him from some sort of satellite. It looks like electricity almost, but who knows what it was. But basically, he overloads him and blows him up.
Yeah, he kind of Thanos' himself. I'm sorry, that's never not going to be a reference now. Leading to Superman actively distrusting Luthor, plus a strain between Luthor and Lois, as she doesn't understand why her husband would create something that he had purposely designed to die like that.
Is that out of the book too, or was that an invention for the movie?
That was an invention. They really upped the animosity between Luthor and Superman to a lot more confrontation in the movie. While they always have been rivals in every version, and in the book they really don't meet each other and have direct contact that much.
Yeah, I remember the book, Luthor being a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for here? Basically, a lot more hidden. You know, he's working behind several barriers and shades. So Superman is dealing with various machinations of Lex Luthor, but he doesn't know it's directly Lex Luthor.
Exactly. We even get a scene in the book where they're at the Superman Museum, and we see, I don't know if they're just models or if they're supposed to actually be like the bodies permanently frozen of Parasite and Metallo and a handful of other common members of the Rogues Gallery, who they say was created by Luthor and sent after Superman, and they all failed.
Now, as in the book, eventually Superman does turn on Stalin. Stalin has the gulags going, and the thing about Superman, as he is in the known DC continuity, he is an idealist. And because he's grown up in Soviet Russia, the Soviet Union, he believes that communism is the right and true path. And that he believes that the Soviet Union are treating their citizens with dignity and decency, and it's the United States and capitalism that stomp on the needy and exalt the stomp on the have-nots and exalt the haves. And
typical human nature, we always believe that the other side is what's wrong, and we'll always glorify what we believe in our hearts is right. We never want to listen.
Now, in the movie, it's Lois Lane that gives him a file that shows him the gulag, and of course, there's a personal collection. There's the analog to Lana Lang, who is Svetlana in the movie. And so, of course, he goes to the gulag, he sees what's happening. She'll end up dying there, but he then realizes that, you know, it's all a lie and that Stalin needs to go. How does that go in the book?
Not even close. First of all, we also have to talk about the elephant in the room, that there's a young boy in the gulag in the movie whose parents have been killed, and he gives the stare. What's that line from Full Metal Jacket? The 1,000-yard stare, 1,000-mile stare? Something like that.
1,000-yard stare. 1,000-yard stare.
Yeah. Yeah, we all know who that's going to turn out to be, especially when a swarm of bats fly around him.
Yeah, I was waiting for pearls to go flying into the air.
Seriously. The gulag itself is not actually in the book. Batman's parents are killed not in the gulag so much. They are killed by, oh my god, what is that character's name? It's the anagram of the DC character Pete Ross, who goes by Pietro Roslov.
Okay.
Who is Stalin's illegitimate son, who kills Batman's parents. I'm going to do that a lot in this review. Because they are protesting.
Okay.
Which I think gives just as much of a nice incentive for Batman to become who he is. Lana is also not called Svetlana. Her name is Lana, but she's given a funky Russian name because, of course, here it is. Lana Lazarenko, I think it's how it's pronounced. And she's not dying. She's just standing in line for bread.
Right.
He says that she and her family used up all of their money to come to Stalin's funeral, and now they have to wait because they have no money for food. And you get a lot of people in line saying they haven't eaten in weeks. Truth is that in the movie, we have Superman killing Stalin for keeping the gulags open. In the book, Stalin dies of poisoning, but it's not. I don't think if it's Superman's fault. It's kept very ambiguous.
Okay.
Superman ends up going after the presidency after he sees what's happened to Lana and the others, but it has nothing to do with Stalin, you bastard. I think Bruce Timm and his crew wanted to paint Stalin more as the monster that he was, and leave out any idea that he and Superman may have actually been close, or that Superman, or he may have been more of a father figure to Superman.
Yeah, they wanted to do away with any kind of ambiguity.
Probably a handful of parents who would complain, "You can't paint Stalin in a good light."
Well, and I'm curious to get your reaction to the difference between how they deal with Stalin in the book from the movie. I will tell you that, the movie moves at a fairly brisk pace, and its little, setups to move the plot along. The book goes out of its way to kind of examine certain aspects of the philosophy of communism versus capitalism. Red Son, the book, is very thoughtful. It's a good read for the thinking man's comic book fan. The movie is more kind of a fun action adventure. What if Superman were a communist story? And and here's the thing. The other side of that is the book, I think, makes Superman less of an idealist and more of the benevolent dictator, especially towards the end, where, he's been running the world for, for a zillion years, and, there's all these crazy advances in science and whatnot. Whereas the movie never darkens his image too much. It's almost like they make him sympathetic the whole way through, and you can't. And one of the ways they do that is by making him get rid of Stalin because Stalin's murdering people in gulags.
The best way to look at it is like this: the book feels like a Superman story that was inserted into history. The movie feels like history was inserted into a Superman story.
Yeah, it's one way of describing it. The movie is much lighter in tone, and like I said, Superman never gets necessarily painted as a villain as such. It's either even with the thing with Batman, because in the book, Batman's a terrorist too.
Yeah, the killing all those people in the museum, that does happen in the books. They just nix oh, I'm sorry, did I say 10 minutes? I meant 10 seconds. That line's not in the book. They really went out of their way to make Batman look evil.
That's the point that I'm getting at, is Superman kind of rides this very same line through the whole thing. He doesn't really have an arc in this. He's sort of reacting to the people around him, whether it's Lex Luthor on the one side or, various enemies on the Soviet side, whether it's Stalin or Batman or whatever. But he's always Superman. Which, I'll say now, the movie's fine, but that's what keeps it from being really great. Mm-hmm. Is that Superman doesn't really go through anything. It's a series of knitted together action sequences, set pieces, we would call them. If you're watching an action movie and there's a car chase and a this and a that, these are different action set pieces sort of loosely knitted together around this idea of what if Superman was landed in the Ukraine. Anything more about the Stalin part? Because if not, we'll move on to the next bit.
No, I think we can go ahead and move on. I am a little disappointed that the movie didn't include Piotr, or however the hell you pronounce his name. Again, I'm going to probably massacre a handful of pronunciations. I've never learned anything about Russian, but I felt that he was an interesting character in the development. of, you see him being against Superman. You see him trying to kill himself, and Superman saves him. He hates his father. He hates Superman, but he wants power. He's a very developed and interesting character, and it really is sad that they had to cut him completely. Whether they thought that he just slowed the story down in the movie, or they were worried people wouldn't get the comparison with Pete Ross, I don't know.
One of the things that happens around the time of the Brainiac attack is the introduction of Wonder Woman, who is an ambassador from Themyscira, and I believe as in the book, so in the movie, they are allies, and she's, as I said, an ambassador. And I think the arc with her and him and their relationship is she starts out as seeing him for what he's portraying, which is, the idealist, benevolent dictator, which she's okay with in the beginning. And then as time goes on and she starts to see some less than savory decisions being made, I think she ends up turning away from him. Talk a little bit about what happened in the book with Wonder Woman and Superman.
First of all, let's get this out of the way. There is no scene in the book where Wonder Woman basically says, I'm gay, don't kiss me.
Everybody's gay. Don't you understand? It's I've already done this rant. Never mind.
Yeah, I was like, didn't we go over this when we were talking about Chilling Adventures of Sabrina Season 3, plug, and you brought in our future review of Batwoman?
Yes, and I can't wait to talk about Batwoman and Supergirl with you. Strap in and strap on, honey, because it's going to be a gay and bumpy ride.
You're going to have to make that the caption.
Strap in and strap on. It's a gay and bumpy ride? Sure.
Yes.
Throw it on a t-shirt, Mindy.
And mark that on your bingo cards.
So Wonder Woman and Superman, the book to the movie, go.
Her introduction is similar. She comes as an ambassador to meet him. They do agree to become allies, but again, the whole him trying to kiss her and she's saying, I'm from an island of all women, put two and two together. Doesn't happen. There's not even an attempt in this book to romanticize them. Again, I've been over this before. I'm not a fan of comic writers that purposely try to put Superman and Wonder Woman in a romantic entanglement because they're two incredibly superpowered people who they feel should be together. It just doesn't do anything for me.
I think it works in the Injustice universe because of how that universe unravels. But I think the more interesting relationship that I've seen was in the animated Justice League with Wonder Woman and Batman.
Exactly. I really like that. Especially that little speech that Batman gives in the one episode. He's like, okay, one, you're a princess. Two, I'm a rich kid with issues. A lot of issues. That's a great speech. They did keep her costume accurate. I love that they changed the golden eagle to the two-headed black eagle, a common symbol from Russia. Thought that was very clever design work. And she does become his ally in helping him fight. There's a great scene in the book where they're teaming up to help people, and they give this speech about President Kennedy. Side note, in the book, it was Nixon who was assassinated, not Kennedy. They talk about how in America people are still living on the streets and how they feel that this is a sign that capitalism isn't working. When, again, you see people waiting in lines for bread in Russia, and it's like, well, which one's really worse?
One of the things about the book, it's an element of Superman that some writers play with and other writers utterly either forget or don't deal with, is that Superman... the House of El is a science house. Father was a scientist, and he, if you remember from which I believe comes right out of the comic, in the Richard Donner Superman movie from the late 70s, he spends an inordinate amount of time. There's actually a cut scene that deals with him being in the time that he discovers he's Superman. And from when he shows up in Metropolis, is like a 7-year, which is an analog to Jesus, by the way, there's like a 7-year period where he's just learning from the Kryptonian archives. And I bring that up to talk about Superman is kind of like half a scientist. And like I said, some deal with that, some play with it, some don't. The book does a really great job of utilizing it because one of the things that Superman does is once he's got control of the Soviet Union, he uses advanced math and science to advance the country so that everybody has plenty. He basically makes communism work, which they don't really talk about in the movie. In the movie, it's basically Brainiac does it for him.
Yes and no. Brainiac is an instrumental part in the book as well. His lead up to the betrayal is accurate, as is his shrinking the city of Stalingrad, although we actually see that in the movie. In the book, it's just alluded to. You don't actually see the ship come out and go, miniaturize.
Well, it's an important part of the book because I remember Superman talking about it being his greatest failure that he was never able to save Stalingrad.
Exactly. Little spoiler here, but if we do when we jump to the ending, there is the fact that in the book, Luthor's plan, which is freaking brilliant, he writes a letter in puts it in a manila envelope and puts it in Lois's coat pocket. And Lois is basically told, just tell him to look where the envelope is. You don't even have to get it out. He'll read it with his X-ray vision. The note says, why don't you put the whole world in a bottle? And that's great. In the movie, we have her actually holding the city. Side note, did I miss something, or did they not explain how she got that?
No, I don't recall how she got it.
Yeah, I don't recall either, but I have a sneaking suspicion if they had just alluded to the note, Bruce Timm and his crew were probably worried that a lot of younger fans wouldn't get it.
Yeah.
So no, we got to be a little more direct. Just have her hold the bottle. Of course, this is all a really great reference to the city of Kandor, long-running Superman plot.
So yeah, there's a bit here where Brainiac attacks, shrinks Stalingrad, both in the book and in the movie, and then Superman is able to defeat Brainiac and reprograms it to be his aide.
With giant quotation marks around it.
The dissidents of the Soviet Union are lobotomized and reprogrammed. That's right out of the book. Like I said, I think there's some fairly large time jumps where, like, the Soviet Union... Well, this is in the movie, too. So it's in the book and in the movie where there's these parallels to where Soviet Union is becoming a rising city on a hill and communism is spreading everywhere to the benefit of most of the people of Earth. The standout, the holdout, is the United States, which is going over a cliff until Luthor becomes president.
United States and Chile.
Yeah, right. There's food shortages, there's riots in the street, that sort of thing. Luthor becomes president, and I think with his big brain, he starts to fix things socially. And now this is where we get the rise of the Green Lantern Corps as a deterrent against Superman. So that's right out of the...
We completely skipped the Batman rise. That actually happened.
Shit, yeah, okay. Sorry. So let me put a pin in that. We'll come back to Green Lantern. Okay, so there's this other plot thread where Batman's a terrorist in the Soviet Union.
Well, again, you're right. There are time jumps because we first saw Batman as a child with his parents being murdered by Piotr. Of course, now he's a full-fledged adult who is blowing up museums full of people. And that he clearly has an army of Batmen, other people dressed in the cape and cowl. I don't know if that's supposed to be a reference to how many allies Batman's had over the years, or the idea that he is so imitatable in and of himself, an idea that got explored a little bit more in the Dark Knight movie.
I was going to say, have you ever read Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns?
I have.
Okay. I thought it was an allusion to that this particular iteration of Batman was the Batman from The Dark Knight Returns, and that his underlings, the son of the Batman, was what they were.
Possibly. The whole scene with Batman luring him out by tying up Wonder Woman with the lasso of truth was true, as was the, use of the red sun lamps and that great line. It's like, oh, sun lamps, keep those going for a couple hundred years. Maybe I'll get a heat rash. That line was in the book, and he gets interrupted by Batman just socking him on the jaw. I love that.
Yeah, so that all tracks. The way that's all resolved and everything, including Wonder Woman being bound with the lasso of truth and her breaking out of it, but like aging herself in the process, that all tracks from the book, right?
It does. I think they were going with the idea in the book with her being his obedient servant by having the lasso wrapped around her was a callback to the original designs that when she was first created, Wonder Woman would become completely depowered if she was bound.
Mm-hmm.
Put her in shackles, tie her up, and she loses all of her powers. And I do not need to go into why it is so great that that's not a thing anymore.
Hey, chauvinism. It used to be a thing. Might still be, but, whatever.
You say chauvinism, I say bondage.
It's one and the same in some certain circumstances.
Look up the original creator of Wonder Woman, folks. You're going to find out some interesting little...
Oh, yeah, he's like a big perv, isn't he?
Was, yeah. Well, he was in a polyamorous relationship with two women.
Oh, that doesn't make him a pervert, but I believe
no,
there were
but
other
I'm
things
not saying
about
pervert, but I'm saying that at the time,
right,
it was perverted. And yeah, a lot of his ideas about Wonder Woman and being bound and losing her powers and everything caused a massive flurry of controversy when they were first published.
Mm-hmm. I think they handled the Batman stuff just fine. Like I said, it tracks almost word for word, page for page from the book, from what I recall. Again, it's the next bit that he goes through. I feel like it had a slightly deeper, more edgier tone in the book, but than in the movie. In the movie, it's just like it's a thing that happens. I feel like in the book it had more weight to it.
I also am really disappointed with what they did with Wonder Woman in this. She breaks her bonds and comes to Superman's aid in both, but in the movie we have the added, my mother was right. I can't trust men at all. All men are alike.
I remember that. Again,
I think the Timberverse crew started reading just a touch too much Frank Miller for their own good.
I think they were reading too much Twitter is what happened.
Tomato at this point. But,
I have to say, if you're going to go, with woke things or, if you're going to virtue signal, I have to ask, who do they think these movies are for? Like, what audience do you think are you trying to reach by doing stuff like that? And who do you think you're going to bring to this universe by doing these things? Because, again, I think time and time again what's been proven is that your biggest, most rabid fan base that's going to pay for these things and watch them and tell other people about them are your tried and true comic book fans. And they're not going to be in love with the I'm gay, don't kiss me, my mother was right, all men stink motif.
Exactly. The people who were most excited about this movie were ones who loved the book. I mean, again, this is a very popular book. It's definitely one of the best-selling Elseworld comics of all time. And it is undoubtedly a staple of Mark Miller's writing. I love it. But
the common thing is that women who are into comic books, sci-fi, and fantasy tend to mirror the male fans. Like, the stuff that a lot of the male fans like, so do the female fans like. There's not a tremendous amount of difference. The perception is women only like girl stuff. And I don't know why that's the case when it's been proven most recently to be dead wrong.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm sorry, you've brought me in several times as the lone female voice of the comic books. Have I ever had a moment where I stood up and said, this is wrong, and it's wrong because it was written by a man?
No. I'm thinking also about, like, the Midnight's Edge Toxic Femininity podcast, where they bring in a panel long-time fans of whatever it is they're talking about. The one that I remember watching was Star Wars, but they've done it a few times with different things. And, like, 9 out of 10 times, most female fans, like I said, parallel the male fans. There's, like, not, you know, there might be minute differences. Some, you know, like half the female fans like Harley Quinn, the other half don't. Same goes for the men. Half of them think she's great, half of them can't be bothered. That's just the way it is.
I will say, I feel that a lot of the people who liked Harley Quinn, specifically the Birds of Prey movie, are not actually giant comic readers. They just know who Harley Quinn is, and they love the idea of a high-profile female character.
Oh, totally. One of the reviewers who I actually like, William Bibiani, just thought Birds of Prey was amazing. And while he is a comic book reader and a fan, I think he was mostly motivated by, oh, look, I can't remember the actress's name now.
Margot Robbie, you know, up there doing fun things with a fun character. But I would say his views on comic books and movies are not the majority view. Side note, if you want to hear me completely break down and lose my goddamn mind, go check out our Damn You Hollywood review of Birds of Prey, The Emancipation of Harley Quinn, plug. Because, yeah, I think you guys even noted that was finally the review where I just lost it.
Yes, we broke you on that one. It was fun.
Yeah.
All right.
It was bound to happen.
Anything else on Batman?
It is important to note that, again, because of the absence of Peter, my God, I'm pronouncing his name like 100 different ways in this.
Yeah, who are you, me?
Huh?
I said, who are you, me?
Was it Magog?
Get him, jit him.
Because of the absence of that character, in the movie we have Luthor providing Batman with the knowledge about the red sun lamps and being able to get a hold of Wonder Woman. In this one, we do have Batman killing himself with the bomb in his chest. That bomb is, and he does see it through the X-ray with the X-ray vision. But before he clicks the button, he says, "Oh, and by the way, you want to know who betrayed you? It was Peter. Bye." Click. Boom.
All right. That leads us to the next part of the movie where Abin-Sur's spaceship crashes on Earth. They, in this iteration, Lex and company are able to take control of the ship. They take the ring, they make copies of it. They start a Earthbound Green Lantern Corps with the mission of taking out Superman. As in the book, as in the movie, Superman wipes them all out.
I do love that they include the bit with Gardner being the one who... Okay, in the book, it was Radner and Gardner who both lost their nerve first. Mm-hmm. Little side note is those two are probably the most disliked members of the Green Lantern Corps. And I love that the line, "think green thoughts," is in both the book and the movie. That's just a great... Wait, what did you just say?
Now, in the book, a lot more happens after the attack of the Green Lanterns. In the movie, that basically leads to the final conflict where Brainiac turns on Superman and him and Luthor take it out. And then, if I remember correctly, now in the movie, he takes Brainiac before it explodes into outer space, and then he just kind of shows up in the crowd later, and he is presumed dead, and many in the world think that he is dead. Wait, no, I'm doing the Incredible Hulk now.
No, you're doing the... Oh my... Can we get a running tally of how many times that's happened where they think a character is dead and then someone sees what they think is him in the crowd or something? I mean, for God's sakes, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter did that cliche.
So in the movie, yeah, him and Lex take out... Lois does the bit with the city in a bottle, which, pierces Superman's cold, cold heart. Him and Lex take out Brainiac. Superman takes Brainiac into space, and then he shows up later as Lex is giving up the presidency, and she sees him in the crowd, and he's off to live a quiet life as a normal human being. In the book, a lot more happens, as I recall, before we get to the point where Superman has to go into space, and And I remember talking about this with Jesse and Ronnie. I didn't quite get the end of Red Sun, so do me a favor. From the end of the Green Lantern to the end of the book, explain to the listeners what the book does and how it ends.
Well, we do get a lot more. In addition to after the Green Lanterns get their asses handed to them, the Amazons attack. I will add that the whole scene in the movie where Wonder Woman basically shows up and says, "Yeah, we are done with you. We're done with you. Screw you guys. I'm going home." Although I will just go ahead and say this. I absolutely love the design of white-haired Wonder Woman in the white dress.
Mm-hmm.
That was awesome. I love that design. But yeah, we get a scene with that. We get a scene with more of the Rogues Gallery attacking, leading up to them getting to the city. And yeah, he sees the note. He finally realizes, I have become that which I hate. Which, let's face it, how many Superman stories has that happened in? I mean, I'm sorry. Again, I love this book. I am such a fan of DC Comics, and Superman's one of my favorite characters. But how many books do we have where Superman suddenly realizes that the ultimate power has ultimately corrupted him?
Mm-hmm.
It happens so much. Jesse, if you listen to this, do me a favor, get a count on that, okay? You know, when you're not going absolutely insane at your job. We're with you, though, man. You know, Godspeed. So, yes, we have the bit where it turns out that Brainiac wasn't actually reprogrammed. He has been biding his time all along, waiting for the opportune moment, because it's Brainiac, of course. The man knows how to move. Or the machine, the computer, I don't know what you want to call him. And yes, Luthor and Superman team up, and Superman realizes he has to take him into deep space, otherwise the whole planet is essentially getting stuck in a microwave. He manages to do. I love the scene where even in the movie where Luthor's like, you know, that you have to go like 50 million miles or something like that. Not even you're that fast, and Superman's like, watch me. The great scene. Again, we assume that Superman has been destroyed along with Brainiac. In the book, Luthor doesn't retire from the presidency. He continues to work. We find out that he is actually achieving some pretty phenomenal stuff. Cancer and other diseases are treated and beatable, and they managed to get the Soviet Union, which has fallen into chaos, under control, and that becomes part of the global United States. And yeah, apparently with Luthor as president, everything is doing incredibly well. And yeah, I am actually a little pissed off at the ending. The ending of the movie.
Okay.
Because in my opinion, the ending of Superman Red Sun is one of the most genius moments in comic book reading. We get a narration as we see a little bit of the future progressing. And Luthor and his family continue to prosper. He continues to have children, and they have children, and we see that they start shortening their names from Luthor to Luth, and so on. We also start to see more that the Earth's sun has become a red giant, as it does over time. Until the day when the last name is no longer Luthor, it is El. And it comes down to Luthor's future descendant, Jor-El.
Ah.
The idea is that time is cyclical. I can't pronounce that word.
Cyclical.
Thank you. And in the end, Earth, which is now known as Krypton, is destroyed, and a little baby is sent off and lands on another planet in the Ukraine in 1938.
So, okay, does the ship go through some sort of time vortex, or is there just another Earth somewhere out in the universe that
has evolved and been created? Yeah.
Okay.
It's just...
So we're talking multiple Earths in the same universe. Well,
I don't think it's even so much multiple Earths. I think it's just that as Earth has evolved into Krypton, another planet is evolved into Earth in the same pattern.
Okay. I think that's the detail I didn't quite understand.
No, I remember reading that thinking, that is the greatest thing I've ever read, and I loved it.
Yeah, I remember Jesse and Ronnie being really into that, and me going, meh. I don't get it. Not enough punchy parts. All right, so overall, we know you love the book, and there's a lot to love about the book, but this one, I didn't dislike it. I think the problem with Red Sun was very similar to the problem with Hush, which at some point me and you should do a comic strip on.
Oh my God, yes.
And I say a comic strip because Source Material already did Hush, like one of its like very first, in like the first year that it existed. So
if you guys haven't, I was going to say, if you haven't done Hush, The Long Halloween, and The Dark Knight Rises, I need to fly to Ohio and smack Jesse. Let me guess, get in line.
Well, he's definitely done Hush, and he's definitely done The Long Halloween. Those are in the early days before he started keeping his shows to like an hour at maximum. Those were some long shows.
You mean longer than before he had to tell me and Robert to shut the hell up?
Yes, that your show like destroyed his perfect record since then.
Those who don't catch a lot of Source Materials, when Robert Winfrey and I guest star on it, he and I have a tendency to go off on the longest tangents about, and just keep getting side branched into every other topic.
Yes,
and Jesse, God bless him, is just not. He can't tell us to shut up like you can, Mark.
I'm podcast dad for a reason. Anyway.
Yes, you are.
They've done Hush. They've done The Long Halloween. I don't know if he's done The Dark Knight Returns. Doesn't matter.
Oh, did I say Rises or Returns?
You did, but I wasn't going to correct you.
In all fairness, that's it. It's a Freudian slip. I know what the name of the book is, but it is easy to mix up those two sometimes. So I apologize.
But yeah, I think we'll at some point schedule a comic strip for Hush. What I was getting to was, I don't even want to talk about the Killing Joke because that had an altogether different problem. But
yeah,
but Hush and what was the other one I mentioned? Gotham by Gaslight. Here's the thing: they're taking some great material, and then they're doing these direct-to-video movies, and it's almost as if they're like, "Listen, our direct-to-video audience is not so bright. Let's not go." I just don't feel like these. I think the people working on them are doing their level best with the budgets they have and the materials they have, but I have noticed a pattern of them kind of taking like the greatest hits from a lot of the source material, slapping them together in a 90-minute feature and calling it a day.
Well, I understand that it's an adaptation. There's going to be edits. If you did a complete, adaptation of every element of the Red Sun, it would probably be 2.5 hours long at minimum.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot to talk about. I get that. You have to condense stuff down. Things are going to be cut. That's part of life.
Right, but that's not what but I'm not criticizing them for cutting certain things.
I'm not either. It does feel that we did review Gotham by Gaslight, and one of the things I mentioned was when we read the book, I was upset that the world of Gotham wasn't fully explored more.
Right.
But when we saw the movie, that's exactly what we got. We got more of the characters that we knew and loved being put into the situation. We had the little Cockney thieves that were the three Robins. We had Poison Ivy as a dancer.
It did a better job of what the Killing Joke was trying to do in fleshing out a very thin story. And you have almost the opposite problem here with Red Sun, where you have this immense story that they tried to condense into a 90-minute feature, but you can still do 90 minutes of thoughtful, interesting introspection and examinations of the Cold War. This doesn't do that. This is... Here, I'm going to read you something real quick, because I think this kind of sums it up, what I'm trying to say.
All yours.
This is from the wiki. In the reactions of the Russian media, and this is after the release. A reviewer from Kanuba criticized the film for changes in the plot compared to the original source. In particular, it was noted that Superman reduced to the level of a villain, added themes of feminism and LGBT, as well as a change in the ending. Mir Fantastici also criticized the adaptation primarily for changes in the plot compared to the comic book. Reviewer DTF noted that the film adaptation, the atmosphere of the original was completely lost, and the main plot twist was removed from the final product. In the review Disgusting Men, the film was considered very weak, having lost its main idea and depth, and also with cheap animation. I didn't think the animation was that bad. It was, it was kind of very similar, I think, to some of the WB Superman, Batman TV shows, which nobody had a problem with those.
Well, again, it's done by Bruce Timm, so it's done in the Timmiverse style that we've seen with Justice League, Batman, Superman, the original Teen Titans series. I actually think that this, it may sound weird, but I do think that this could have benefited had they done a different animation style.
Yeah.
I don't have anything against what they did, although there is something about this animation style that drives me nuts. It's so hard to explain, but I've also seen it in that new Looney Tunes show that came out. The characters seem to have a shadow behind them before you see them hit the cell. Makes them pop more. And I hate that, and I think it's because working in Photoshop for as long as I have as a digital artist, I look at that and all I can think is, okay, who the hell added a drop shadow? That's what it legit looks like to me. And it's, oh my god, it drives me insane.
So I agree with this line here about it being weak and losing its main idea in depth. So here's where I'm going to kind of be of two minds. In the time that I was watching it, for the 90 minutes that I watched it on the couch, it was an enjoyable watch. I'm disappointed it didn't live up to the book and was missing its depth. So it's not that I didn't like it. It's more of it had a lot more potential than it showed, and it could have been a lot better. Instead, it almost feels like the DC animation studio has become a factory, and this is another widget that was produced in that factory. And I hate saying that because I know these people work hard on them. I see the little documentaries that they do in the DVD extras. DVDs, children, were these little discs that you used to see movies on before you could just, hit a button and download them through Apple or Roku or whatever it is you're using. Anyway.
No, I agree. Superman Red Son is a great story, and while I can't say there's anything intrinsically wrong with the adaptation, if you're a fan of the book, you're going to like it. If you're a fan of the Bruce Timm animation style, you're going to like it. But I feel that had they just been in the hand of a different animation company, we probably could have gotten a lot more out of it. It does feel very cut and paste, especially if you see this along with the other Timmiverse films that have come out, like Gotham by Gaslight.
Yeah, I don't know how much time they're given to do these and how much more time they would have needed to produce it, but I think going forward, like, there are some that I want to say the Teen Titans, the Judas contract actually breaks my heart. Like, I don't know how close it is to the book, but that actually got an emotional response out of me. It got an emotional response out of my daughter as well. Some of these have ended up being really good. Some of them have been a bit slapdash. Like I said, I think most people thought Hush was kind of a weak representation of the book, in the same vein as we're talking about with Red Son. And then, of course, The Killing Joke was a fucking disaster. But if you look at some of the other movies that have come out, I did put on the schedule Wonder Woman Bloodlines for in August now, when that comes out.
Mm-hmm.
But, you've also got The Death and the Reign of Superman. I thought those were good, and I didn't read those books, but I haven't heard a tremendous amount of complaints about either one, and I enjoyed both of those. I took my kids to go see them in the theaters. Suicide Squad Hell to Pay, I actually thought was a lot of fun. We talked about Gotham by Gaslight. Batman and Harley Quinn was hysterical.
Was Suicide Squad Hell to Pay the one where they found out that the current holder of Dr. Fate's helmet was stripping?
I don't remember. Yeah, the Judas Contract I thought was well done. The Justice League Dark movie was okay. The Killing Joke was a disaster. So, point being that it seems since they've going all the way back to Justice League, the Flashpoint Paradox, and everything that followed it, which was now in the New 52 animated universe, which this takes place in, I believe. All of the main continuity ones do. It's very scattershot. It's very hit or miss. I don't know how many of these you've seen, but like I said, some of them are great, some of them are middle of the road, and some of them are the Killing Joke.
I'm saying this right now. When we get to starting comic strips, commandment number 1, thou shalt not bring up the Killing Joke.
You can't tell me what to do. You're not my mommy. I'll see what I can do for you.
I'm just worried because I don't want that to become a repeating gag as Reese Witherspoon turns into romaine lettuce.
Have we mentioned Venom yet?
Exactly.
All right, I'm going to give you, if anything left unsaid, the last word, and then we'll do plugs and get out of here.
Again, if you want to see this movie, I'm not going to stand in your way and say, no, don't, it's crap. It does have some problems, but overall it is still enjoyable and does follow a lot of the concrete parts of the book. However, like any comic book fan, I will tell you, obviously the book is much better, and I cannot recommend enough that if you want to see a really perfect Elseworld Superman story, check this one out.
All right, and with that said, if you enjoyed our little collaboration tonight, I hope you'll tune in on April 6th for the inaugural comic strip, Batman versus TMNT, where we'll have this knitted together discussion of the book and the movie at the same time, 2 flavors in one. Yum it up.
Fun fact, the guy who did the voice of Russian Superman also does the voice of Raj Al Ghul in that special. It's Lucius Malfoy himself, Jason Isaacs.
Very good. And that's why we bring you on here, for all the animated goodness.
The only reason I'll say that's the only reason you keep me around.
In the meantime, next week we'll be doing I was convinced to make it a Damn You Hollywood because Robert Winfrey insists we talk about the state of the movie industry currently, such as it is, a giant crater. So We'll be doing a Damn You Hollywood for the now video on demand, The Gentleman. So there's that. And then you get a double dose of Robert Winfrey. I kidded him last night on our Ozzy Osbourne review. I said, you made a snide comment on Twitter about how I turned your hobby into a nightmare of scheduling. He was like, well, you did. And I'm like, uh-huh. And then the world ended, and now you have no podcast. How about that? But I'm a jerk. It's fine.
And we're already predicting that next month the end of the world will continue with tornadoes. Just hope that you don't end up near the coastline, or they're probably going to get filled with sharks.
Or there you go. Sharks with laser beams. March 31st.
No, seriously. Sorry, a friend of mine actually did post today, because, again, live in Kansas City, this is part of Tornado Alley. It's not spring until you see it on Facebook, everyone saying, okay, got the dogs heading to the basement. Remember the Aladdin review last year where I had to explain to you guys that you had to wait for the freaking sirens to end before I could join you?
I vaguely remember this, yes.
Yes.
March 31st, we'll be doing a TV party for BoJack Horseman, an entire series. Looks like I'm riding solo again because nobody in the Radulich Broadcasting Network likes heavy metal quite like I do. So I will be reviewing by myself Heaven Shall Burn of Triumph and Sacrifice, of Truth and Sacrifice, rather. And then myself and Pat Mullen, in theory, will be doing the next chapter in our heavyweight boxing series, Cassius Clay, the early years of the great Muhammad Ali's career. In the meantime, you can check out myself and Robert Winfrey did a very personal, very emotional review of the new Ozzy Osbourne, Ordinary Man. We talked a lot about our shared issues with depression and self-loathing and aging and disease and all of that. It's all We had fun with the record, but it was a very revealing episode. Myself and Alexis Hejna, as you've just heard, we did a TV party this past week for the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina Part 3. And, hey, one more time, Alexis Hejna. Myself and Chris Armstrong joined Jesse Starcher to talk about the first 5 issues of the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina comic book. Hey, so why don't you tell all the people where they can find you? Hee.
Yeah, as soon as I can get Eddie to stop interrupting. Did his bark come through at all on that last part?
It did, but it's fine. People at this point, it's part of the charm of the Radulich and Broadcasting and Ambient Sound Network.
I think he wants to go out. All right. Yes. Thank you, Eddie. Honeysuckle Rose Creations, the intersection of geek and chic. Unfortunately, it's pretty obvious by this point, but all of our spring conventions have either been canceled or postponed. I think the only one that is still on record is happening in late April. That's in Cape Girardeau, and even that one, we're just waiting for the final word from the organizers. I don't know what's about to happen. Stay tuned to our Twitter and Facebook feed. We are posting updated dates and schedules as we get them. We do have a couple of shows that have already sent us their rescheduled dates. I am going to be going a little crazy this June and August. But, of course, you can still find our online shops on Etsy and Handmade at Amazon. For the rest of this week, we are doing a 20% off sale on everything in both stores. That's going to end at the end of the week because I have new products that I need to go ahead and get online, including a handful of new wire wrap dice necklaces and some brand new Monopoly token charm bracelets. Of course, you can always find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Under Duress Twitter. Honeysuckle Rose Creations, the intersection of geek and chic.
All right. That's it for this iteration of TV Party Comic Stripped. For Alexis Hejna of Honeysuckle Rose Creations, be well, be safe, and now I'm going to say behave. And you've always got some sort of wiseacre remark as I'm playing the end theme music. So I'm going to go ahead and say behave, do your thing, then I'm going to hit the music. Are you ready?
Das Vidanya.
Be well, be safe, and behave. God damn it.
I didn't even see you say, I'm ready already, and then just say it. Sorry. But yeah,